Everybody, this is Raul with the Catch Wrestling Alliance, where we keep real wrestling alive. Thank you very much for watching us or listening to us. Speaking of listen to us, if you listen to our podcast, I don't know. Hopefully, you didn't notice any glitch in the past week or so where there was some delay with the episode coming out because we switched over to hosting everything on our own website. So there was a little bit of problem with Google and Apple like switching over to to our like getting the episode from our website instead of we were using Anchor. So basically Spotify. So um, but the interesting thing though, so even though I switched over to where our podcast is being hosted, Spotify was actually the fastest one to switch over. It was like instantaneous. That like all I said was just take the file from our website instead of your website, and then they just switched it. So if anybody was listening on, or if anybody listens to our podcast on Spotify, then um, there'd be no problem. You wouldn't have noticed anything, I don't think. But on Apple and Google, it just took a few days. So, but everything should be fine now. So we don't really have to have any ads or anything like on Anchor. They kind of want you to have ads, but no need to have ads anymore unless somebody wants me to say something, right? um, but anyway, so any recent updates going on right now? It's basically we're still doing our thing like at Fight Science MMA, still teaching class. We also have our classes going on at UCLA, which are going very well. So just we'll keep you posted on any events and stuff. In California, we there are like different judo and I mean, actually not judo, but jiu-jitsu tournaments and stuff going on, but not as much as some of our surrounding states. Like a lot of stuff going on in Las Vegas and whatnot. So we'll see if we can start doing more things here in California, so we can keep real wrestling events going on too, right? Okay, so today's question, or at least today's kind of topic, is I found this cool old video. It's really short. It's only about 2 minutes long in its entirety on YouTube, and it was a brief video where the person who shot the video, it seems, was had had access to Marcelo Garcia. So if you don't know who Marcelo Garcia is, he is a very, very well known and respected jiu-jitsu practitioner. His his academy is out in New York, and so he's like ADCC champion, and like all the like he's super well respected, super accomplished. And so quite often you'll find on YouTube like videos of him rolling with really famous people, including famous wrestlers like Ben Askren and whatnot. And so in this short video clip, the person, Michael Cooper, I believe that's the name. I'm sorry if I messed it up, but what I did was I linked the original video down in the description box, so you can feel free to go watch it. It's very short, so it should be very accessible. But anyway, the person filming asks Marcelo Garcia what he prefers or if he tries to incorporate judo into his nogi game. And actually, might as well just show you the clip so you can. So just know that Marcelo Garcia, if you're not familiar with him, he does have a very strong accent, but um, hopefully you can figure it out. Hopefully you can understand. I did take their original video and I processed it a little bit, so hopefully like basically hopefully there's less noise. I denoised it, so you should be able to like so the microphone focused on his voice instead of like all the surrounding kind of staticky noise around him. But beyond that, like you actually should be able to hear his voice better than the original video, but also he has a strong accent, so it might be difficult just to understand. But he's asked if he incorporates judo throws into his jujitsu. All right, so here we go.
I think like to learn judo, it's way different than wrestling. And wrestling like you can use for both gi or no gi. And if you learn judo, probably gonna be able to use just with the gi. The no gi is gonna be a little hard to make the adaptation for both. So I prefer much more like I use the wrestling move that is easy to match with gi and the no gi. Then becomes like a really good in like a judo moves that are gonna need the gi most of the time. It's gonna be really hard to do the same transition like a judo throws uh, in the no gi because you don't have the gi. You see much more people like getting good to take down doing wrestling than doing judo. I'm sure you can do the transition, but it's really hard.
All right. So hopefully you understood most of it, if not all of it. But basically, what he says is instead of using judo, he incorporates wrestling more into his no-gi game because no-gi or actually wrestling, and I think you can kind of like infer that catch wrestling also would fit better into no-gi than judo. So that's basically his opinion. It's like it's a little bit easier to take wrestling takedowns in particular. He's talking about takedowns in particular, and you can use those in both gi and no-gi. And he says that judo takedowns will probably only transfer to like jujitsu in gi, right? So that's kind of what he's talking about. And why does he say that? There's many reasons. Like the grips are a big thing, at which you wouldn't necessarily have the same kind of grips when you're doing no gi. So what that means is like you wouldn't have the clothes to hang on to set up your takedowns or your throws. But um, wrestling, since it's gi basically, everything is set up based off of grabbing the person's body, right? So you find your grips on the actual body than grabbing their clothing, right? So he's saying that he's been able to take some wrestling takedowns that he can use in both gi and no gi, and that's what he would focus on more. But ultimately, I think I might have cut it off a little bit early, but he's just kind of saying he was just saying like, well, ultimately I do jujitsu, so I spend most of my time training on like the techniques that are on the ground already. So I think ultimately he doesn't necessarily care how it gets to the ground, but wrestling in particular would probably be the thing that works best for nogi as opposed to judo. I tend to agree, but I think I want to kind of give some examples. So, like for those of you who've been like watching or listening to our live streams, uh, some people were like the other week we were talking about wearing shoes to even train nogi and whatnot, which is totally fine. But then you see like say if you were going to do like an MMA match, then you might want to not wear shoes, right? So you get used to being barefoot because that's how your match is probably going to be. Um, I think the same thing goes on to like say MMA. So I would actually think that there's kind of like a nogi judo movement going on too. Like we actually have we have a course on our website where we have a very skilled, well-known judo practitioner, right, showing you some of the fundamental nogi techniques and stuff, nogi judo techniques, right? So but what I want to say about MMA is that, like, so since MMA, you actually have more of an upright stance, right? Because you're kind of kickboxing at the beginning, so that upright stance actually like can like where judo can get an advantage in that point where like you saw Ronda Rousey and you see some other people using some of these judo and actually wrestling or even Greco was like Dan Henderson. I believe he had more of a Greco-Roman background, so you can get like these upper body throws because when you're in MMA, you're both more upright when you start and or when you're striking, right? So judo can kind of be a little bit more on equal footing to wrestling at that moment, but since say like Marcelo Garcia, his focus, right, like he says in the video, is jujitsu. So, right, and in this case, no-gi jujitsu. So you don't have to be upright in your match at all. You can start seated, right? Or you can start in more of a traditional wrestling stance where you're a little bit more crouched over. And um, so then wrestling in particular would be probably the most beneficial, at least in his point of view. I tend to agree, right? Because of many reasons, like he says, like a lot of the wrestling takedowns can translate into both gi and no gi, whereas judo seems to focus or at least be best with gi. But wrestling in particular can work for both. But then also stance wise, I think wrestling, and you can then bring that bring that out to also mean catch wrestling would be the thing that would benefit or like be the most beneficial for someone to like work on. Right. So I believe a lot of these things. So like in catch wrestling in particular, a lot of the takedowns, so the stuff that you start with standing, a lot of the fundamentals of each takedown can also be applied when you're on the ground or can be modified when you're down on the ground. So whether on your knees or whatnot, a lot of these fundamentals and these fundamental principles can be used both times. So um, I think that I think learning wrestling can, or at least catch wrestling, can go more or can go beyond being just some kind of supplement to your like nogi or your jujitsu or whatever. I think right now a lot of people still are kind of thinking of it as a supplement. Um, I kind of see that a little bit even at UCLA, but I've seen it for many years where people like their main thing would be jujitsu, and then maybe they'll take an extra catch wrestling class like once a week or something like that. But the rest of the time they're doing no gi or gi or whatever. All right. So I think right now, for the most part, catch wrestling is still seen as like that supplement. But it can totally stand on its own, and it does stand on its own. It's just right now catch wrestling is not where it used to be in the like in the hierarchy or kind of even in the public mind, right? It definitely lost its prominence. um, but it it can be really effective in no-gi as well, right? If not, like how we had a few weeks earlier, we had a uh, great video where it was discussed where like, so like if it was a real fight or whatever, catch wrestling would probably get the edge over uh, your average jiu-jitsu practitioner, right? So we have Marcelo Garcia, one of the greatest, kind of explaining it. And so hopefully kind of with my breakdown of what he said, uh, hopefully if when I'll go ahead and play it again, so hopefully it becomes a little bit more clear for you.
I think like to learn judo, it's way different than wrestling. And wrestling like you can use for both gi or no gi. And if you learn judo, probably gonna be able to use just with the gi. The no gi is gonna be a little hard to make the adaptation for both. So I prefer much more like I use a wrestling move that is easy to match with gi and then no gi. Then becomes like a really good in like a judo moves that are gonna need the gi most of the time. It's gonna be really hard to do the same transition like a judo throws uh, in the no gi because you don't have the gi. You see much more people like getting good to take down doing wrestling than doing judo. I'm sure you can do the transition, but it's really hard.
Yes, hopefully was that a little bit more clear. Hopefully it was for the second time around. But yeah, the breakdown's ultimately the same. I would kind of give credit to judo, especially in an MMA situation, because again, everyone's upright, right? So you start upright and you try to kickbox upright and maybe go for your takedown or whatever. So judo would be more on like equal footing with regards to that like sport specific situation, right? So with that being said, let's go ahead and hear some of your thoughts. Shinhei, hello, Coach Raul. What's the topic? So we're talking about judo and wrestling and super great jiu-jitsu practitioner Marcelo Garcia, um, talking about how he would prefer wrestling takedowns over judo. So, okay, Intel, Northside Serpents. I love South American ground karate. Yeah, that's what we're all calling it nowadays, right? Ground karate. I grew up catch wrestling. Intel, Northside Serpents. Wrestling equals gross movements. Judo equals finer movements. Alec 702. Khabib has a cool mix of judo and wrestling. Yes. So he's one of those people. Khabib is one of those people who can really adapt to any situation and make the other person look like a beginner, right? So very rare and like super talented guy. Shinhei for both wrestling and judo is very important aspect of BJJ, although it's very hard on the body. Hence the reasons why wrestling do very hard body conditioning. Uh, Amilcar Montiel, catch wrestling in the SGV. I'm assuming you're around LA, right? So SGV around LA means San Gabriel Valley. For those of you who don't know, there's like a actually LA has a bunch of like hills and valleys and stuff. So um, you'd be I'm assuming you mean San Gabriel Valley. So um, not exactly. So if you can come to Mid City area, we're at Fight Science MMA every Thursday night actually at 8:30. So you still have time to drive over. Yeah, you still have an hour. So so come on over. Um, yeah, exactly. So yeah. Okay, so Shinhei. During years of BJJ, most of injuries I have witnessed during takedown and wrestling drills. Yeah, I think that sure. I think it's also kind of like what a lot of people are saying about like uh wrestling is when you get injured or whatever. But yeah, possible, but um there's injuries all the time. I don't necessarily think that uh well, maybe amateur wrestling has like the potential to be a little bit more injury inducing, I guess. But a lot of times, if you're taking care of your body and stuff like that, then should be okay. It's like catch wrestling should be worse, right? Because all the neck cranks and all that. But um, I don't know. Yeah, I don't really see these injuries happening so much. But yeah, I do hear people talk about like, oh, the injury, wrestling creating injuries or whatever. But um, I know we have a lot of people and doing collegiate wrestling and stuff like that. So we got a lot, right? So they can't all be injured like all the time. Granted, you're always going to feel sore and whatnot, but they're not going to be like debilitated where they're like having to do surgery and stuff like that. But I guess who knows? Who knows? But I'm not quite seeing it. I'd like to see some evidence about that. So yeah, go ahead and continue making your comments or questions or whatever. But ultimately, we're kind of talking about how Marcelo Garcia, the the great jiu-jitsu practitioner, preferring adapting wrestling takedowns for his nogi over judo, and like he's described it himself about like how just the judo itself kind of stays where it's like you're grabbing onto gi, right, grabbing onto a gi, and so then it kind of stays within that realm, right? And I'm sure judo practitioners would probably uh you know beg to differ, but my point of view, or at least in my perspective and my experience, would be more of like that upright stance, right? So the judo practitioners that I've worked with, they tend to want to remain more upright because that's kind of what they're used to in their like what they do in their competitions and whatnot. so you can kind of lift someone up easier and kind of get under them easier. So that's kind of what I've seen, and I would say that that would be detrimental in a no gi and even a catch wrestling and wrestling situation. Um, take and I've worked with some judo practitioners where we worked on getting them to more of a wrestling stance, and then say like one example is like one judo black belt that I work with. He's been telling me that a long time ago, his friends that were doing folk style wrestling, they were able to just kind of like take them down often, and then nowadays, after doing catch wrestling for a few years, um, they just can't do that anymore. And he's able to hold his own or whatever when he goes and actually do really well against a lot of these collegiate, folk style wrestlers that are around in our like around LA. We have plenty because we have so like even at UCLA we have like a club sport for folk style and freestyle wrestling. The same is true for other universities and community colleges and stuff. So it's kind of easy to meet other people who are just focused on the amateur styles of wrestling. Even at the 10th Planet Jiu Jitsu place that I go roll at, they like on Sundays I think they have a teacher. It's not affiliated with the school, but they have like amateur wrestling, and I think it's pretty well known. I don't know. It seems like a bunch of people show up, but yeah, they only want to do amateur wrestling. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to do the submission holds or anything like that. They just want to do that amateur, where their time limits. You know they they're doing their thing. All right, Shinhei. How catch wrestling leg locks differ from BJJ leg locks. There's one of the things too. So especially like the big example would be. I mean, yes, there is a submission hold, but say like for Frank Gotch, which would be a mega example. Um, they often would use what they call the toe hold, right? Not necessarily to submit somebody, but to give enough pain to the joints where, in order to relieve the pain, the the opponent would have to roll over onto their back. So it's more of a rolling someone over, kind of, or showing the kind of like a neck crank, where you can use that neck crank to get the person to move the way you need them to. So same thing with the toe holds, right? So you can think of that as like the even the so like yeah, heel hook kind of position, where like a heel. For those of you who are familiar with heel hooks, you kind of get it where it's like you have, say, the toes here, and then you got your forearm over the heel, and so you still have that push pull movement. So you're you're like you're still doing this push pull where you'll give the person enough pain, or give your opponent enough pain where they're going to want to roll to relieve that pain. And sometimes they roll and they're actually making it worse for themselves. But that's kind of the idea, and that would be the main difference between jiu-jitsu and catch wrestling, where the pin is still part of it. So you can use that kind of push pull pain compliance move to get the person to roll over onto their back, or to make them move the way you want them to move to set up another type of finish or a pin. Right. So that would be kind of like the main difference. I mean, you can still totally use them as submission hold and whatnot. And also we have that famous example from Frank Gotch and his match against Hackenschmidt, where Hackenschmidt was really scared of his toe holds, and even though Frank like didn't really use them to submit people, he actually still like pinned his guys, right? So he's pinned his opponents. Um, when Frank put his like put his toe hold on to Hackenschmidt, like he's like, Mr. Gotch, I give up, kind of thing. Um, so that is a big time example from history, where you can kind of get an example of kind of the different way of thinking about controlling even through the ankle, um, over just doing like heel hooks and stuff like that. You can totally get submissions from all these positions because if the person can't move, to relieve the pain, then they have to submit because they can get injured. Shinhei, is the ball and chain a type of toe hold? Not exactly. It is a type of, we call it like a leg ride. So it would be something more like that, where you can try to control somebody. But a toe hold, you can do a toe hold from a ball and chain, but um, oftentimes you kind of keep the person from moving or getting away from you, and then you can set up other like, so if you have the ball and chain on one leg, then maybe you can actually go for the a type of toe hold on the opposite leg, or you can still try doing it on the same side leg, but um, yeah, up to you. You can try it. You can try it because that's definitely a technique that is possible. But I like maybe setting up other techniques as opposed to that same side toe hold. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Shinhee. Shinhee is actually all the way in New Zealand. Hopefully, New Zealand opens up or lets Americans visit. I'd really like to go. Um, yeah, so keep me posted. All right. So if anybody else has any comments or whatever, questions, feel free to chime in. Um, otherwise, Shinhee's going to ask everything. Shinhee's going to talk the whole time. Just kidding. Um, Yeah, so let me know your thoughts. So, with regards to judo or judo or wrestling being better for no gi. I tend to agree with Marcelo Garcia. Um, no offense to all the judo practitioners that I work with, they're all really great, but yeah, it does seem like with regards to like creating a bridge or what would kind of go seamlessly into a no gi game, it would be wrestling, but or wrestling takedowns, right? How like Marcelo Garcia was saying in the video. But I think catch wrestling in particular would flow a little bit more seamlessly into a more complete no-gi game. All right. So um let's go ahead and take this time to, just let everyone know if you're enjoying the type of stuff we do. Just if there's any questions or comments, you can at any time you can send us messages on any of our social media. But if there's a topic you want us to cover, just let me know. A lot of times these live streams kind of come about from a lot of your questions or your comments and stuff. So just keep it coming. I really like to, like I like to let you like have access to myself as well, or to help give you a better understanding of catch wrestling, since there's so many different types of uh, uh, misrepresentations of catch wrestling out there. So, just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I've been doing catch wrestling for over 10 years, and of course, I've trained with Billy Robinson and whatnot, but I trained with Roy Wood as well, who is like the lineage holder of Billy Riley, so the coach for both Roy Wood and Billy Robinson, and Roy Wood is still the the successor and the coach at Wigan, right? So the famed Snake Pit in Wigan, right? So I trained with Roy as well. I also have like the highest level certification from American Hook Wrestling. So that'd be my good buddy John Strickland on the East Coast. So if you're on the East Coast of the United States, please go train with him in South Carolina. So um, so I believe that I would be a good source to get information about catch wrestling from. I also teach at UCLA. I also teach at Fight Science MMA. So feel free to come train. So Shin Hee, the Gotch toe hold. So yeah, the Gotch toe hold ultimately um, puts a lot of pressure on the ankle joint and enough to um, really get the opponent to roll over onto their back. He would do it where he would apply it on across the person's body, and then he would lift the legs off of the ground or off of the mat, and that would allow the person to roll over onto their shoulders. Gridiron Masters. Where did leg and ankle locks come from? BJJ seems to think they invented it. Are they right? Of course, BJJ thinks they invented it, but just remember so Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is not very old, right? What I guess officially Gracie Jiu Jitsu, so they even have it where they officially started right 1925 or something like that. So catch wrestling had toe holds much longer. But um, just so for everyone to know, it's like, wrestling has been what humans have been doing since the dawn of time. So, well, there's even like, what is it like in some kind of in ancient Egypt somewhere? There's like depictions of all these wrestling moves on some wall. There's there's basically what even in the Bible there's descriptions of wrestling. There's like what the oldest storybook that we have, the Epic of Gilgamesh. It starts off. Well, it doesn't necessarily start off, but like really close to the beginning, there's wrestling. There's a wrestling match between the main characters and stuff. So um, a lot of a lot of these, even for catch wrestling to claim they invented something, still, you can probably, if you dig deep enough, you probably find a depiction of that same move in some, in some cave in Egypt or something, right? So um, with regards to wrestling, because like all these different cultures around the world have been doing wrestling since the dawn of time, then you can't claim to just automatically make up stuff, which is unfortunately happening nowadays, where it's like someone's like, oh, I made up this move, and then they name it after themselves, or they give it some funny name or strange name or whatever. So that's a little bit of arrogance or whatever. So no, all these techniques are quite old. Shinhei, coming from a BJJ guy, BJJ people claiming submission holds to be theirs, you really don't like it, right? So, yeah. So Shinhei's like the Mikey lock or whatever. Yeah, so people are. I've known some people who, yeah, they even try to promote like the move that they made up or whatever, but it all goes back to some like certain principles. A lot of times, like that push pull movement, or so like arm bars and toe holds and all these different types of joint locks usually incorporate this kind of push pull movement. Uh, so it ultimately they, you can't claim to do something or to have invented something that's like so new that it's like some human didn't do at some point in time. Gridiron Masters. I saw a BJJ no gi match where someone who trained catch went against a no gi guy. BJJ guy sat down immediately. The wrestler fought for a guard pass and then got leg locked. Um, yeah, totally possible. And what we saw in, we kind of talked about it a few weeks ago, where Flow Grappling. I don't know if you've seen their YouTube channel, but they put out like um, a 30-minute video where they actually show like all the high level guys that they get from wrestling, and how they've gotten like leg locked like really fast, right? So yeah, that's definitely um, showing like there's like shortcomings. And even if someone claims to have done catch wrestling, and then if they get submitted in leg locks, I mean, it's totally possible to get caught, right? But chances are, like, who knows how long they've been doing it. Gridiron Masters, the comments were saying that catch sucks, but the leg lock isn't from BJJ. So what does it mean to say that catch sucks? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like the mainstream mentality is dominant. So it's like people are going to be thinking that jujitsu made up all these things. So anything that's like has a different name or is like kind of seen as different, then could be seen as like not complete or inferior or whatnot. But a lot of times people don't know that history, so then they're just caught up in the mainstream mindset, which isn't always like a true picture, right? And like, yeah, like jujitsu is only since 1925. Judo is also not very old. I believe it's I, I learned that it was like a recruiting tool for Japanese youth to bring them into the army. So it's not that old, and so uh, catch wrestling does have a longer history, a longer evolution, right? Um, so there's kind of like this history that a lot of people um, just either don't know or they ignore, or they, a lot of times it's so easy to just get caught up in like the mainstream thing without having to analyze or to research, right? So then they just get stuck there, and they think all kinds of weird, inaccurate things. But it happens in a lot of topics, right? So Shinhee Yi, I can't agree more. Well, good, because I agree too. Hala, nice to see you, Coach Raul. Nice to see you too, Hala. Thanks, thanks for hollering, hollering at your boy, right? Gridiron Masters. When I'm training, I hear the instructor say, "No, that's wrestling, not jujitsu." Then goes on to teach a wrestling move. Yeah, exactly, right. So if it was so bad, right, then why are they teaching it? They're teaching it because it's effective, right? And I feel that, say, like if you're someone who is cognizant of, well, let's put it this way. So there's, say, like my good buddy John Strickland on the East Coast, he's talking about like, truly, if you're really really great at catch wrestling, you probably wouldn't need to supplement by training like at a jujitsu gym, right? Personally, I feel like, yeah, if you want to be doing no gi, and um, if you want, so let's put it this way: if you want to be doing no gi, I wouldn't do gi at all, right? So go to like a school that I mean, you can go to a school that does both or whatever, but if they're only offering, like the school that I used to teach at, I used to teach no gi for them, but it's only like one class out of two total per week. Um, so the rest of the time was all gi, right? So I would not recommend anybody, if they want to do no gi, don't go to these gi heavy schools. You want to go to a school that offers no gi several times a week, and also um, where they don't necessarily adhere to the IBJJF rules, right? So if they're going to be teaching you leg locks and all that stuff, that'd probably be the place you want to go. Um, what if you happen to be in Southern California, sure, we have a wider variety. Of course, we have several 10th Planet outfits. We also have we have what in San Diego. Um, was it Atos and all that? So, um, and then also we have here in Fight Science MMA where I teach, and at UCLA, right? So I believe UCLA, we offer no-gi and catch wrestling. So we got them all. We got it all, right? So, and I guess I found out that UCLA has the most diverse martial arts program, I think, in the United States. So that means we have all these kinds of martial arts where I personally never heard of some of them. So, but we got them. So and apparently people know about it, because I heard a student tell me like, oh, I did a style that I'd never heard of. I've been doing it since I was a kid, so I was really happy that UCLA has it and all that. So yeah, we have a very diverse program that has martial arts from, not just from Asia, right? We have, like say like catch wrestling is from England and stuff. So we have this diversity. So I would say, like, say if you're big into no gi, so it's kind of going back to our main premise with Marcelo Garcia, where he's like, hey, my, if I find wrestling more effective for no gi, um, so I would incorporate wrestling more into no gi, right? And so he would actually prefer to learn wrestling takedowns as opposed to judo takedowns, right? So kind of the same thing. If you want to be doing something specifically, do the real thing where it's like, so catch wrestling in particular has submission holds. It's also a no gi kind of style, right? So it would be great. It would be like the thing you'd want to do instead of, like, I'd say, wasting time doing gi. And like going back to Gridiron Master's comment about like he's like, when I'm training, I hear the instructor say, no, that's wrestling, not jujitsu, and then goes on to teach a wrestling move. Yeah, it's like, it's effective, right? So that's why they're teaching it, but they still want to seem like their thing is superior, which is, it's strange, it's bizarre. Hala, when are you going to talk about how long does it take to get a black belt in catch? Um, Well, traditionally there's no belts, right? So, and there's another thing where it's like kind of like the mainstream thinking is from this Japanese tradition of using a belt system. For our Catch Wrestling Alliance Academy program, so like our online training program that you can find on our website, we do have levels, so 4 levels instead of like the jujitsu 5 level thing. Um, so it does take time. It's really easy to kind of like get your to finish the white belt stuff, right? So you'd have to show proficiency in the fundamentals video course that I put up there. There's two: the stand up fundamentals and the ground fundamentals. But then you have to, like, I definitely want to make sure that you're proficient at doing these things. So I ask that people or the students in there show like video of them rolling with other people, and so many of you who are in there have been showing that, so which is great because you helps me to help you better, and also gets you to incorporate a lot of these techniques better. And so people are really liking it and finding like success using traditional catch wrestling moves in nogi. Right? Let me see. Ooh, you got a bunch of comments here. Let me try to scroll back. Shinhei, this is why I wanted to see catch wrestling expand so people have more choice. I am sure there will be one day catch wrestling out of nowhere destroy BJJ. And then Hatebreed 516 talked about like when Barnett dominated Dean Lister. Gridiron Masters. Why do you think Jiu-Jitsu has no pins? I don't think a 3-second pin is enough. Maybe if you could catch someone in a 10-second pin, there would be less laying on the back. I think, well, I mean, there's different things to that. I mean, quite often, like jujitsu is described as like kind of a response to wrestling. So they, if they're the person, if they're the smaller person and they're getting pinned all the time, then they try to develop techniques from from the bottom, right, to try to get out of being dominated all the time by a wrestler. Um, so there is that. Like I always heard that explanation. Um, but also they try to talk about self defense. So they're thinking like, well, there's always, um, like if even if you're pinned down by somebody, then maybe there's still a chance that you can find a way to beat them, like with a submission hold or some other kind of self defense technique. So that's kind of their perspective or their point of view. So there would be like no pins, and but again, ultimately, it's still quite like you can still think that it's better to be on top, right? So you can still restrain and control the person, your opponent, So, like, say if you're in an MMA situation, then you can ground and pound, or if you're in a no-gi situation, you can try to set up your submission holds, right? So, just as long as you're in control, um, being on top gives you a lot more freedom. Um, so, so there, right? I'm not sure about the length of time. I think judo has um, like a was like a 30-second pin or something where you can kind of pin them where it's like basically if you keep them on their back for a long time, then you win. Something like that. Shinhei. Hands down, catch wrestling submission is far more painful than BJJ and a faster tap. All right, sounds good to me, right? But yeah, definitely if you're doing it right. So if you're doing the techniques really well, and you got everything locked up nice and tight, then the submission should be pretty fast. Hala, awesome, thanks. Well, thank you for asking, Hala. Great. So yeah, go ahead and keep your questions coming. You definitely have a little bit more time left. And so yeah, kind of going back to one little thing with regards to the people who listen on podcasts. Well, just so you know that this recording will be available tomorrow, probably on our podcast. So in podcast version, wherever you get your podcast, and like it was just a temporary pause, so hopefully, if you're listening on iTunes or through Google Podcasts, then hopefully there was whatever interruption is fixed, because it just took a couple days for Apple and Google to switch over. Hala, approximately how many moves do you have to master in catch wrestling to become proficient? Well, a lot of times it's the fundamental thing where it's like you kind of like going back to Gridiron Masters technique, or Gridiron Masters comment about like uh, whether you're doing jujitsu or not. So you have to make sure that you're not falling into guard and staying in guard. You're actually trying to get off your back, trying to not necessarily stand back up, but you're trying to do counters. Catch wrestling does have this really beautiful kind of flow to it, where if a lot of counters, if your wrestling is really good, you'll be flowing through all these different types of counter moves. Um, and if your opponent is really good, so they'll be countering your counter moves and whatnot. So it does have this really good flow to it, but it wouldn't be like hanging on to someone like um like holding them into guard and all that in your guard. All right. So if someone double legs you and you fall back onto your back, kind of into like a guard kind of situation, you don't necessarily stay there. You can try to roll them over, or you can try to get out, but still trying to keep it on the ground. And so learning those fundamentals are the most important things. And then the other move, so it's like you learn those fundamentals, and then you learn our main submission holds, which basically there are three, and everything's a variation of those three. So, you have like the headlocks, right? So our neck cranks, our double wrist lock, and the toe holds. So all the different leg locks can come off of that toe hold. All the different arm locks can come off of that double wrist lock. The different face locks and whatever come off of that headlock, right? So, and then we also have like rides, right? So different ways to control somebody when you're on top. All that's part of catch wrestling. So you can kind of break it down to its fundamentals, but then you gotta be shown other varieties of techniques, right? So there are quite a few, but a lot of it can be distilled to staying off your back and learning the submissions, and being able to control someone when you're on top. And if you're on bottom, how to get out, right? All right. Oh, you guys are making a lot of comments. Hold on, let me back up the comments. All right, so Shinhei, like the double wrist lock, catch wrestling will break your arm into three when BJJ Kimura only attacks at the shoulder. Gridiron Masters. I don't see someone I don't see how someone who can't escape a position like side control gets to keep playing like they haven't been beat. I know it's not a submission, but if they can't move, what's the difference? That is exactly correct. That's well stated, right? So, yeah, so this is why um like catch wrestling is easy to understand for like a spectator, because if someone is stuck on their back and they can't move and they're struggling to get out and they cannot get out, you've shown that you've controlled them, right? And so I think that was, and I think you can still even see it in like in WWE, and then even in the Olympic freestyle and stuff. You see this control. Actually, probably even more so in WWE, because they make a big spectacle of the pin, right? You have the referee slamming them back, going like 1, 2, and then like the person kicks out, right? And then eventually it gets to where it's like they get to 1, 2, and they finally get the 3. So yeah, even WWE, still after this big long, many minute long battle between the two wrestlers, then the end is that pin, right? Like the vast majority of the time, and even in WWE. So yeah, it goes back to showing that control. A lot of times in WWE, they hit each other, right, with the, or slam each other, and you do all these different things to then show that like maybe the person's so tired that they cannot put up a fight anymore, and that's when the pin happens. But that's kind of the same principle, right? Where the other person has that control, they have the enough energy to keep them from getting out or kicking out, so they won, right? They've shown the control or the domination, right, without having to even submit the person, right? But because they just can't get out. Shinhei, gridiron, I totally agree. Hala, thank you Hala. Gridiron Masters. I know when I can't escape from a higher level mount, they have to get off me voluntarily if they want to let me work. Correct, right? And I think that what you're describing is something that's happening and it's almost like understood in a way, like, but it's almost like unconscious that this has to happen, where it's like, yeah, you've actually gotten pinned, or if you're in the, like how you mentioned, the person in mount, um then like the person in mount has pinned you, or if you can't get out, and if they have to let you out, right, that shows like that they got some really good riding abilities, right? Good pinning abilities, right? And so that should count for something, but oftentimes that doesn't necessarily count for anything in say like in a in a situation where pins don't count. Hala, hold on one second. Gridiron Master. Someone who holds a dominant position in a tournament is called for stalling, but the ref just doesn't realize that the guy on bottom has lost. Correct. Correct. And so along this is let's go and keep on that. So it's like the rules for NCAA wrestling have changed throughout the year. So um, it was pointed out to me by John Strickland that he found a passage in an old textbook where they did keep track of what they call writing time. So nowadays, I mean, they still have writing time, but like say like if they and they had longer time periods for their matches. So if no one got pinned, they would keep track of who was riding the other person longer, or who was on top, basically, or who was the most dominant, and that person would win, right? So the riding time was a criteria for the winner, right? To determine who the winner was. Hala, did you train Curran Jacobs when he beat 5 guys from the snake pit in one event? Yes, I was like his first catch wrestling coach, really. And so then my buddy John Strickland also was helping. Um, yeah, but then after that, then he went off to do his own thing. So yeah, I didn't coach him when I hadn't really coached him for many years. All right. So actually, I better get going talking about teaching class. So I must get going. My class is going to start in just a few minutes. So we'll go ahead and thank you now for watching and listening. Thank you for helping to to be a part of this dialogue. Feel free to ask any questions on any of our social media. We're on, of course, like Facebook pages. Facebook. We're also on Catch Wrestling Alliance. Same thing with Instagram, Twitter. We're on TikTok also. And so for those of you who want to like help us out even more, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. And we also have extra videos for members and stuff. So you can check out those tiers there. You can also, if you want to learn catch wrestling, you can go to our website, catchwrestlingalliance.com, and join the CWA Academy, where we have several courses there. So it's graduated. So, if you learn, and then once you show proficiency, then you can get access to more lessons. Right? Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for still getting some comments. Thank you. Thank you for those of you who are commenting. Yeah. Thank you for your time. And yeah, hopefully all of you guys can come back and we can have another discussion next week. All right. So thank you, and together we will keep real wrestling alive.